On the right here is Stan Jones, father of world champion Alan Jones. And Biv Stillwell talking to Jack Brabham. A very indifferent environment for Formula One racing in the 1950s. And how about the lack of Armco barrier or debris fencing for the spectators? A few straw bales, and if you miss those, then you're straight into the trees. Safety was not the primary concern back in those days. Well, Stirling Moss took his second win on the Albert Park circuit in the Cooper here in 1958, with Jack Brabham finishing in second position. Stan Jones was one of the unfortunates, but not as unfortunate as this gentleman with his rather bent motor car against a tree. Moss, the hero once again. And even then, Formula One drivers had busy schedules and had to helicopter away to be somewhere else very quickly. Well, one of the drivers of the time, one of the top Australian drivers, was Biv Stillwell, and we met up with him on our trip to Australia.
Well, I think that they've got away from these hard braking, slow corner, acceleration circuits with, as a lot of people call them, stop-go circuits. I think it's going to be very challenging for the drivers with these linked fast corners. I think it really demands of them, and it's where you really make up time on a good handling car or the extremely good driver.
Time for us to take a little more detailed look at the circuit itself and see just what the challenge will be. A map of the circuit shows you the basic outline of the lake, but with a few places where some right and lefts have been put in to slow the cars down a little bit. We're going to take a proper look around the circuit, starting on the pit straight, the lower point of that map, and a bit of a high-speed lap to see just what's going on. The track, of course, still in the process of being built at the moment. Into turns 1 and 2, some overtaking opportunities into that one, and a fast sweeper coming out. Another straight out of corner 2 and into turn 3, another possible overtaking opportunity. Then snakes around the bottom end of the lake, runs through between the trees up to turn 6, which takes it out to the far side of the lake and into some fast sweeping corners. The cars will be accelerating hard alongside the lake before they come up to one of the changes. A chicane or a right-left to slow them down a bit. Otherwise, the speed would just be getting silly. That's corner 9 and 10. They then sweep around the far side of the lake to come up to corners 11 and 12. Again, extra track has been added to the road surface there to slow the cars a little bit. Into corner 13, and we're now onto another short straight. Running along underneath the bridge and into turn 14. We're into the final sequence now as we head back towards the pit lane. Turn 15 is a tight left-hander, and then they sweep through the final corner, turn 16, which will certainly be pretty fast. Back on to start-finish again, and let's hear some comment from John Watson about the track. So, of a lap. Let's follow the simulated Grand Prix car around a lap of Albert Park, and in a few days' time we'll be able to see just how accurate this simulation is. Through the tree-lined avenue, we're now coming into turn 6 and out onto the sweep alongside the far side of the lake. Into corner 9 and 10, the chicane that's been added in before accelerating again very close to the side of the lake itself. Corners 11 and 12, and then another curving flat out section before coming back around the top end of the lake into turn 13. More overtaking possible into this one before that final sequence of corners heading back towards the start-finish. Well, so much for the circuit design, but what do drivers really think about it? Schumacher down there in 9th place, and Ferrari still struggling really to get much running with the car. And to finish off this week, the ELF presentation of drivers was held in Paris earlier this week, and therefore ELF-sponsored drivers turning up to meet some of the youngsters who perhaps will be threatening them in the future.
Well, so far my feeling about F1 is very positive. Of course, all I've seen is the testing, pressures and more demands. But coming into F1, from what you see on the outside, you expect a very cold world with no humans in it, and it's actually the opposite. It's like a big family once you're part of the team. It's only that it's easy to criticize because it's always under closed doors, so nobody can really have a peek at it.
Damon Hill back from testing in Estoril, as with many of the other drivers like John Alesi.
Bon, le bilan, c'est surtout beaucoup de travail puisqu'on a pu.
Well, the summary of testing for us is that we did a lot of work, as we did around 10 days of testing, and that's the important thing. For sure, we had some problems,
des problèmes qui sont sous
but they were problems which we now have under control.
Tout a été modifié, tout a été
All the problems
préparé.
Have been modified, or everything that was wrong has been modified and prepared, and now the car is en route for the first Grand Prix. Well, the drivers having the opportunity to get up on stage to be interviewed about the coming season at the ELF presentation. And Damon Hill talking about the youngsters in the ELF scheme as well.
I think they also get the best out of the drivers in Formula One by reminding us that there are, for every one place in Formula One, there are 100 drivers out there waiting to step into our shoes. So the motivation is always behind us. I've grown up within the Williams organisation, and but now I feel like I am, if you like, an adult in Formula One terms. So it's good to have to stay in the family still and to attack the championship with that environment.
Frank Williams listening closely as they plan for the championship attack. What about Flavio Briatore's comments at this point of the season?
Which is also the oil tank on Formula One cars, which seems to be causing a great number of problems. Gearbox irregularities in construction have limited the number of laps that Schumacher has run, and Eddie Irvine has not run anywhere other than on the Fiorano circuit at the factory itself. So Ferrari with a long uphill struggle towards competitiveness, never mind reliability. Schumacher, remember, he's the former world champion for the last 2 seasons, stoical in the face of adversity.
I don't dream. I'm a realistic person, not a dreamer, I have to say. Thanks, Mike.
Well, less dreams, probably more nightmares for him, but the nightmare is over, seemingly, for McLaren's Mika Hakkinen. Now he is trying to rebuild the fitness after, of course, that enforced layoff following his accident in Adelaide. We'll be hearing from him later. But the new Formula One McLaren goes into a season for the first time since 1992 with the same engine package it ended the previous year with. And that sort of continuity is meat and bread to designers. What seems to have yielded rewards in terms of overall improvements in reliability and in performance is this continuity of approach. And of course, once you've factored in Ron Dennis's legendary love of winning and the input of Alain Prost into the team, expect McLaren to be strongly aiming for victory in '96. Well, defending Constructors' champions Benetton have a point to prove. They believe the team was more than just simply Michael Schumacher and determined to show it. With Mercurial Jean Alesi and the huge experience of Gerhard Berger to draw on, a superb lineup at Benetton, and with Ross Brawn's B196 expected to be right on the pace from the word go. Again, Benetton looked likely to be Williams' biggest challengers early on. Answering suggestions that he's too emotional to win the World Championship, Lacey replied, perhaps Schumacher's legendary cool might fade after he's trudged away from as many smoking Ferraris. Well, the general feeling is that Williams have spent the winter sandbagging slightly. Jacques Villeneuve has topped timesheets, but Damon Hill has rarely, if ever, gone for an outright fast lap, concentrating instead on the brand new FWA-team's race setup. Reliability and speed have been superb in the hands of both drivers. Villeneuve, like some of the drivers, a little bit worried about the fact that testing has been a winter world championship and the racing is still to come. But with over 6,000 miles in the Williams underneath his belt, undoubtedly he's going to be very much prepared for the season, even though the new drivers for him are going to be the big question mark, as well as the new circuits. A welcome boost to Jordan Peugeot last week with the announcement of a multi-million-dollar sponsorship deal with tobacco giant Benson & Hedges. A new signing, Martin Brundle, who nearly beat Ayrton Senna to the British Formula 3 title with Eddie Jordan's team, has brought invaluable experience to the equipe and helped move on the winter testing program of Gary Anderson's purposeful 196. Also joining the team, Gianni Morbidelli, you just saw, as their test driver, and the new reserve. And the new Tyrrell 024 has been extremely impressive in qualifying. In testing too, driver lineup Mika Salo and Uko Katayama, the only one in the pit lane not to have changed over the winter. And the new Tyrrell seems greatly to have rejuvenated the Japanese, who fell rather flat during a disappointing 95 season. Expect to see the Tyrrell aiming for the points at every race this season. In contrast, things rather tougher this year at Ligier, a cash crisis. Development has been restrained, but the team have aimed for talent in Olivier Panis and cash in Pedro Diniz, who hopes to improve his fortunes with the fledgling 40-course team from last year. On the plus side, there's the Mugen Honda V10 and Tom Walkinshaw, who hates losing. Don't count them down and out yet. British and Italian Grand Prix winner Johnny Herbert joins perhaps the fastest driver in Formula One, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, as part of the Sauber team. But their joint hopes of moving out of the shadow of Michael Schumacher may well be blunted. Ford's brand new V10 engine is almost certain to run into reliability problems in its first season, even if it can prove to be on power a match for the current pace setter Renault. Renault's latest V10, the RS8, is out for the season already. Late news from Minardi is that although Pedro Lamy remains, Taki Inouye will be replaced by 21-year-old German Giancarlo Fisichella. Inouye's sponsorship has dried up, so the 94 Italian Formula 3 Championship gets his Formula 1 break, courtesy of long-time fan Giancarlo Minardi. Now struggling perhaps to make the grid will be Guido Forti's small outfit, with a revised 95 car going to Melbourne. They may be in big trouble. Andrea Montermini and Luca Badua might be better off in this sort of machinery with the new 107% qualifying rule. And the new Arrows will be a different proposition for Jos Verstappen and Formula 3000 graduate Ricardo Rosset. Despite cash worries, the new hard V8 powered car seems a big improvement, and a talented rather than wealthy driver lineup should certainly help. Join us for more in a second.
Prove that I can be world champion, because I haven't achieved that goal yet. Have the style of Alain Prost and the sort of flair of Ayrton Senna and the sheer balls, for want of a better word, of Nigel Mansell, then you know, if you could bring those three together in one driver, then you'd have a pretty potent mix there. spent 300 hours flying last year, actually, which is the equivalent of about 12 days actually in the air. And so there's an awful lot of travelling. There's an awful lot of time changes as well, so that upsets your sleep pattern, inevitably. But simply coming back, even if it's after a European race, we'll get back on Sunday night, late Sunday night. But I probably won't go to bed. You'd expect me to be very tired after, even if I've won a race, when I'm wanting to relax, but actually I'd probably stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning, and then I'd wake up at about 7:30. So it takes me about 2 days to actually get back, to come down, if you like, from the excitement of a Grand Prix weekend.
The morning sun, I feel you touch me in the pouring rain. And the moment that you wander far from me, I wanna feel you in my arms again. And you come to me on a summer breeze, keep me warm with your love, then you softly live. And it's me you need.
Well, I like to spend a lot of time at home doing so-called normal things, like taking the children to school, and that's a great pleasure for me to actually spend some time at home with the family, because I spend so long away, and that's a great way for me to relax too. But as I said, my mind is never very long away from thinking about motor racing.
Just over 3 months ago, Mika Häkkinen suffered a very severe accident while qualifying for the Australian Grand Prix. So today we've come to the McLaren factory to speak to Mika, to go over the ground since that fateful day, and talk about his hopes and aspirations on his return to Australia for the first round of the 1996 FIA Formula One World Championship. Well, clearly, I think your recovery is remarkable, and also I'm sure that when you got out of the car after that Ricard test, you must have felt something very special. The emotion must have been really remarkable.
Yeah, well, when I put my crash helmet on and I sat in a car, they put the seatbelts on. Naturally, you start looking instruments in a car, and everything comes back to your mind. You know, racing Suzuka and racing and the situation in Adelaide, all this. And you start looking steering. I hit my head in the steering. This all comes to your mind. And you just have to stay strong. You just have to say, okay, here I am. I'm continuing now my work, and just see what happens. Just don't let any emotions come involved too much. Just see what comes. See what happens.
And when you got back out of the car, you thought, why did I ever think all those thoughts that I tortured myself with?
Yeah. Well, actually, when they did start the engine. And first of all, that was just like other planet, you know. Engine was very smooth, cutting vibrate, nothing. It was just fantastic. And you accelerated, and the response of the engine was perfect. You know, you just felt the engine was responding. And you realized the car was fully your control. I can choose my speed, what I want to do. I can slowly if I want. But that's not the idea, and I wanted to go fast, and I was able to control the car every second, everywhere in the track. And I went fast, and I was able to control it, and I enjoyed it, and I loved it, and I came back to pits, and lap times were good, and everybody was happy.
And you were particularly so?
I was very pleased. Well, I was very pleased. Maybe not too excited about it in terms of lap time. Excited, you know, it's a good lap time. I was just excited because I wasn't 2-3 seconds slower than people who were running their day before. I was actually more or less same time, or maybe done it quicker, which gave me a great confidence and gave me the feeling back. I said, okay, this is a good baseline. Now we start working.
Following the point that you made, that you in fact think that maybe since the accident you are a better racing driver, is that possible, in fact, that after a major accident you can actually be better and not at best the same.
Yeah, and it could be. It could be. I'm saying this because accident like I had, it's at the end of the day very negative. You know, nobody doesn't want an accident, you know. But life has to continue, and you have to look back, things what you have done positively. You have to try to look positive things out of it, and I had my accident, and then try to now to look all the positive side of it, what that accident created for myself, for my life, and for my work. And maybe this accident did make me maybe a bit more, could I say, maybe mature, maybe older, maybe more clever. I don't know, but I feel maybe I'm not rushing anymore so much, and maybe I'm a better racing driver now than ever.
So, what are your thoughts and maybe prospects for the first Grand Prix of the season?
Before I ran the new car, I said to everybody, I said such a way I have put the target for myself to go to Melbourne to win the first Grand Prix, and that's the target for myself. And I wish the car will be also in a position to be a race winner.
Eurosport have been out to see the circuit, Mika, and it's very interesting. It's a fast circuit, it's a street track, but it's fast.
Good.
And I think, from what I know of you for many years, watching you in Formula 3 and all your way through your Grand Prix career, it's a circuit I'm sure you're going to enjoy, and we wish you luck and look forward to seeing you and Marlboro McLaren, Mercedes-Benz, coming back with a really positive memory of Australia.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Regulation changes of the last couple of years, this year's new rules are more restrained, but still they'll mean a very different look to every car on the grid. And as well as that, there are technical changes beneath the skin. There's a new look to Grand Prix weekends as well. Friday exclusively for practice, setting up the car for the race, with 2 1-hour sessions split by a 1-hour lunch break. Drivers will still be allowed no more than 30 laps per session. Qualifying will be done just during 1 hour on Saturdays, as before, from 1 to 2 p.m. local time. And again, as before, just 12 laps timed per driver. The hope perhaps is that restricting qualifying times might throw up a slightly different looking grid, particularly as in last year's Belgian Grand Prix if the weather is changeable. But the pressure in qualifying will be more than doubled. Top teams will be fighting for pole, but at the back of the grid they'll be trying desperately to get into the race courtesy of the new 107% rule. 107% of the average lap time last year would be about 5.5 seconds slower than the pole time. Some of the cars at the back of the grid last year were 7 and 8 seconds slower. And these will be movable goalposts as the quicker guys go quicker, so the slower guys have to increase their speed more than that to try and get onto the back of the grid. It's going to be a tough time indeed. So what can we expect to see from this year's season, this new crop of 96 cars? Well, changes over the winter have concentrated on safety as well as performance, and the most obvious size will be the difference in the cockpits. Now, the new cockpit restraints Jacques Villeneuve has found are going to be a little bit of a problem. It makes it harder to tip your head into a corner, and the more upright you sit, the more tiring it's going to be in the fast, hard corners. And secondly, he says, it limits your peripheral vision, which is okay while you're on your own on the track, but when you're racing, and particularly, he said, when you're trying to overtake other cars, you will never know what's around you and whether they have seen you or not. So while they provide much greater protection from lateral intrusion into the head area, they are certainly going to make drivers fairly much work for their living. Head protection and side impact resistance have been stepped up in the crash testing on this year's chassis, trying to build up the strength in the driver's safety cells, and hopefully signs like this should no longer be in Formula 1. Mika Häkkinen's tyre punctured by running over the razor-sharp edge of the front wing end plate on the Jordan last year. front wings must now have end plates that are no less than 10 centimeters wide, and they have to have a rolled radius as well to get away from knife-edge shards of carbon fiber puncturing tires. Last year's needle-nosed McLaren will never be seen again either, as long as regulations continue. 5 centimeters back from the front of the nose of the car, there must be a cross-sectional area of no less than 14.5 square inches. So that means needle noses are out and wider, flatter noses are back, less likely to puncture a monocoque in the occurrence of a side-on impact. So a much wider profile, and aerodynamic changes have been brought in to ban the little winglets that appeared at the end of last season. An area a foot ahead of the rear axle line must be clear of aerodynamic aids. So of course the designers have pushed them just over a foot ahead. Lots of rear wing extensions tacked on to the back of the side pods in evidence. And in the hope of reining in some of the more expensive avenues of engine research, variable geometric length exhausts have been banned, so too have exotic materials in engine construction. So don't expect to see carbon fiber blocks or ceramic pistons for a few years yet. Circuit being brand new, an untimed session will be held on Thursday before the real action starts, and as we mentioned earlier, a very different look to Grand Prix weekends. So practice from 8:30 Central European time, 7:30 in the UK, so it's set the alarms as ever for Australia. Qualifying on Saturday, again from 7 AM at British time, and race morning warm-up at 23:30 Central European time Saturday, before we go into live coverage. John and Ben in Australia. We'll talk to them then. In the meanwhile, thanks to Autosport magazine for all their technical information, and it's bye from me. See you in Australia.
White man can't talk